It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
How we feeling, Met fans? I mean, we're still 7 games under 500, but the New York Mets win a series. And it's amazing how baseball in one moment can change everything. Because if you're sitting there, whether you're at Citi Field, I was lucky enough to be there on Thursday night, or you're at home and you are cursing out this freaking team, frustrated by the fact that they let a guy that 98% of the population had never heard of hit them into the 6th inning, get shut out until they scratched out a run in the 7th when they had bases loaded, nobody out. You are cursing out the Mets because they're about to lose 2 out of 3 to the Miami Marlins. They're about to erase any goodwill, if they had any, that they may have developed from sweeping Washington and getting a split against Philadelphia. And you are thinking to yourself, this is the same crap. You're at home against the Marlins. You have a chance to start building something, and you're going to lose 2 out of 3. You scored 10 runs in game 2 of this series, and now you can't scratch out anything against Roddery Muñez and the Marlins bullpen, and you're angry. And I admit it, I'm angry. I'm sitting there at Citi Field. Weird circumstances brought me to this weeknight game with my oldest son, Jet, and we're sitting there, and I'm explaining to him how much the Mets suck. And I'm explaining to him how disappointing this season has been. And in this moment, he's also asking me, Dad, it seems like all the teams we root for, they're less popular than the other team in town. I said, yes, that is true. They also suck. And the feeling that we were about to have on losing this game on Thursday night and losing this series against Miami was going to put just a cloud over any hope you may have had. But the beauty of baseball, why it is such a marvelous sport, is that one swing and one moment can change everything, at least temporarily. You know, it's funny, if you are viewing the Rico Brogna on YouTube an hour after the game ended, you're going to probably be enthusiastic and excited. If you're listening to the Rico in podcast form 13 hours later and you've had a chance to sleep, look at the standings in the morning, you're probably going to be like, yeah, great, you're all excited about a win. Who cares? They suck. But in the moment, whether you're in that building or you're at home, that swing by J.D. Martinez for the time being changes your mood and changes your feeling about this team. Because instead of losing 2 out of 3 to the garbage Marlins, instead of being shut down and only scoring 1 run after putting up 10, the Mets win a game. They win a game dramatically. And it brings us back to that same stupid thing we always say, which is, hey, guys, maybe this turns the season around. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that, but I am, I guess, sane enough to enjoy a great victory in a moment. And that was a great victory. It really was. Anytime you win in a walk-off, how about the fact that J.D. Martinez had never had a walk-off home run? I didn't realize that until my dad texted me that as I was driving home. But anytime you can win a game in that kind of way, it feels good. So to the Met fan, I say this. It's okay to be happy. It's okay in a moment to say, hey, that was a fun win. Hey, this has been a good series. Hey, maybe I've got a glimmer of hope as we march towards the middle of June. But it is remarkable to think about how if J.D. Martinez doesn't smoke a 3-1 pitch to right center field and instead weakly grounds out to third and then Pete Alonso strikes out, it's amazing to think what we would be saying right now and how down we would be on this team. And maybe you're still down on this team, but in the moment, they pulled one out of their arse. And it allows you, this is what I love about wins. I love a lot of things about wins. It changes my mood. It makes going to sleep a little bit easier. But what it also allows you to do is appreciate the good in a baseball game that you wouldn't have appreciated if they lost. So I'll give you a specific example of that. Luis Severino. Luis Severino has been great. He really has. He has been a tremendous New York Met. He has gone out and made every start. I'm going to knock on wood when I say that. And look, he's been hittable. He's walked guys, but Luis Severino, at the end of the day, has kept the Mets in games. And you look at a night like Thursday night against Miami. Here's the bottom line. Yeah, there were 10 base runners. Give up 1 run. 6 innings, 1 run is pretty damn good. And Luis Severino has done that for the Mets basically all year. This has not been a great year. They're 7 games under 500. And I jokingly tweeted out, I wasn't joking, I just tweeted out about a week and a half ago, hey, who would the Met 1 All-Star be? Now, Mets have had such a disappointing season. Who's their all-star? Every team needs a representative. And I think it is obviously clear that if there is one person that deserves that recognition on this Met team, it's Luis Severino. If J.D. Martinez doesn't hit a walk-off home run in the bottom of the 9th inning to win this game, are we even talking about Luis Severino? Maybe passingly. Maybe we talk about how they wasted a brilliant start by Sevy, but I don't think we would be able to take a deep breath and say, hey, let's appreciate the fact that Luis Severino's had a damn good year and pitched really well on a Thursday night against the Miami Marlins. And that's the other thing that makes wins great. You get to appreciate good things. That was a good thing. It has been a good thing. Luis Severino has been their most consistent starting pitcher. It's not even close. Jose Quintana's been their worst. Tyler McGill and David Peterson, you can't even rate. Sean Manaea has been very up and down. Christian Scott's back in the freaking minor leagues, and Adrian Hauser got bounced to the bullpen. So when you're power ranking the Met rotation this year and how guys have done, it's Luis Severino by a mile. And he pitched really well. I look back at the 3rd inning of this game when the Marlins got the first 2 guys on base and Christian Bethancourt was at the plate. And I was even thinking, I was saying to Jed, I'm trying to explain baseball and strategy and all that crap. And I'm like, you know what? They should bunt right here. And, of course, Bethancourt can't get a bunt down. And to Sevy's credit, he got out of it. 3-0 on Jazz Chisholm with 2 on and 1 out. Got him to pop up the shortstop. Got Brian De La Cruz to ground out. How about the 4th inning? The 4th inning looked like trouble. Pitch counts exploding. He's walked back-to-back guys, Jake Berger and Nick Gordon. The bases are loaded with 1 out, and he gets a huge double play against the speedy Tim Anderson. How about the 5th inning? He puts himself into trouble. Gets a huge ground out of Josh Bell. Unfortunately, makes the one mistake to Jake Berger. Head of the count. Berger goes oppo taco. But Luis Severino really gave you a solid performance. The negative was this offense. The negative was, I don't know how many people noticed this, how many people were at the game. They announced 22,000 people. I don't know how many people were there. But they put up a stat in between innings. I forget which inning, but obviously the Mets were doing nothing offensively. And it was talking about how many hard hit balls the Mets have hit over the last month. How the Mets are one of 2 teams in the National League that had 400 hard hit balls over the last month, or whatever the stat was, with the only other team being San Diego, who they're going to play over the weekend. And I'm looking at this stat, and I'm thinking to myself, who gives a rat's ass? All right, great. They're hitting the ball hard. They are such an inconsistent offense. You put up 10 runs on a Wednesday night. That's great. That was fun in the moment. We'll get to that game later. You can't answer that the next day by getting shut down by Roddery Munoz. What the hell do the 10 runs even mean? And that's why stats can sometimes be deceiving. If you play 2 games and you score 10 runs in one game and one run in the next game, you're averaging 5.5 runs. Pretty good, but not very good because you're not winning a game when you score 1 run. So I see this stat that they pop up on the screen. The Mets have hit the ball so hard over the last month. And while the offense has been better, there's no question about that, it still feels so wildly inconsistent. It still feels like you never know what you're going to get. Look at the opener of this series. Look at this entire series. How about that? In the opener of this series, we'll spend a little bit more time on game 1 and 2 as we recap the series. They scored 2 runs. 2. And it should have been more because they left a runner on second, nobody out. So they scored 2 runs in the first game of this series. They score 10 runs in the second game of this series. Great. And then in this game, the Thursday game, they had 1 run going into the 9th inning. So think about it. The Mets had scored 10 plus 2 plus 13 runs in 3 games. Meanwhile, 2 of the games, they couldn't score any freaking runs. So what you want is just that consistency. And we haven't gotten it. Now, luckily, after being no-hit into the 6th inning by Roddery Muñoz, they were able to break it up. Harrison Bader, of all people, behind in the count. Then he got thrown out trying to steal. But the real killer in this game, the moment where I thought, wow, we are going to lose this game. We are going to lose 2 out of 3 to Miami, was obviously what happened in the 7th inning. In the 7th inning of this game, they get Roddery Muñoz out. They're facing Anthony Bender, Brandon Nimmo, who has done nothing. But every once in a while, the good of Brandon Nimmo is that he gives you that quality at bat. He draws a walk. Now, that's not enough for us. Brandon Nimmo needs to wake the hell up. He has not. He drew a walk. And it's like, okay, here we go. Mets are in this game. They're down 2-0. They're trying to respond because Jazz Chisholm just hit a home run off Juice Smith. They get the leadoff man on. J.D. Martinez rips a line drive over third, left field corner double. They got second and third, nobody out. Stop right there. In that moment, with second and third and nobody out, down by 2, you got to tie the game. And my simple thought was, you know what, Pete Alonso? Even though we're paying you to hit 3-run home runs, hit the ball to second base or hit the ball to deep right field. Score a run and advance the runner. You can play little ball at this point and tie the game up at 2-2. Pete draws a walk. Okay, great, even better. They have the bases loaded and nobody out for a guy who's probably been their most consistent hitter over the last few weeks in Starling Marte. Let's not get lost in the fact that his defense is atrocious. He's hit. We are able to separate the two. You have bases loaded, nobody out against Anthony Bender. Marte's got that count in his favor, 3-1. It was actually 3-0. 3-0 pitch was a strike. And this is like the moment. And he grounds into a double play. Oh, my God. You know, you have these live betting odds now. The odds of winning the game is this percentage at this point in the game. You could also have your confidence percentages, right? We all have our confidence percentages. 2-0 game, bases loaded, nobody out, Starling Marte up. I'm probably like, 60-40. I'm feeling pretty good. Here we go. This is going to be a big inning. We're going to take a lead. We're going to win. Like, I'd probably say 60-40. Like a level of confidence, but not overwhelming. As that ball is off of the bat and it's moving towards Jake Berger, my confidence level dipped to about 2% because you could see the double play coming. It was turned. The Mets score a run, and that was the other thing. I'm explaining because I got Jed in my ear saying, well, Dad, they scored a run. Isn't that good? I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it's good. But 2 outs for 1 run when you got bases loaded, nobody out, the count's 3-1 on Starling Marte. No, son, it's not good. We don't like that. So my confidence percentage at that point went from, I feel good about this game, 60, 65%, down about 2%. Mark Vientos could have made me feel a lot better, all of us a lot better, by ripping a base hit. He had a very quiet day today, ended up grounding out the shortstop. Great pick over there at first base by Josh Bell, too. That was an absolute killer of an inning. You have bases loaded, nobody out, you can't score. If everybody's being honest, you would admit you thought we were dead. You thought in that moment, this game is freaking over. I can't believe they're going to lose to the freaking Miami Marlins again. They're going to lose 2 out of 3. They're going to be 2-4 against this team. And there's no spin job that's going to make you feel better. Now, major credit to the Met bullpen. That's the other thing that you can enjoy in a victory. Sean Reed-Foley gave you a clean inning. And then it was so important. And I don't want to overrate it, but I do want to give it its proper due. And that is Edwin Diaz coming into this game. It's against the bottom of the Marlins order. I understand. I get that. Down by a run. You're facing a Marlins team that averages 3.5 runs a game, and it's the bottom of the order. We all get that. But I thought it was so important for Edwin Diaz not just to have a scoreless inning, but have a clean inning, an inning of confidence, an inning in which, unless my eyes deceived me, he got to 100 miles per hour. And I usually don't care that much about velocity, but with Edwin Diaz, it was good to see. It was good to see. And considering the way the inning started for Edwin, with a first pitch being a little bit outside, and I'm being sarcastic, Euchre style, the fact he was able to fight back after being behind 2-0 on Anderson, get him to ground out, strike out Otto Lopez, and give you a nice clean 1-2-3 inning, that's important. Because if this team is going anywhere, if they are going any kind of magical run, they need Edwin Diaz badly. Because Edwin Diaz could have a trickle-down effect on this bullpen, which has been a problem over the last few weeks. He can make everyone better. All of a sudden, you're not asking Reed Garrett and Adam Ottavino to close games out, or Jake Diekman to close games out, or Drew Smith like we saw in London. All of a sudden, it just changes the complexion of a bullpen. I thought it was so important for Edwin Diaz to come in and give you that nice, clean 1-2-3 inning and set up what happened next and set up the fact that the Mets were able to have the game-winning rally. Now, let's talk about something that would get more attention if the Mets didn't win. I mentioned that these good things would have just not been talked about if the Mets didn't rally in the ninth inning. How about the opposite effect? How about something that happened in this game that most of you probably already forgot about, but were pissed off as it happened? Now, Pete Hoffman, is there anything in this game that happened that annoyed you, but you've already forgotten about it because the Mets won? Has it already flipped your mind? Because I have a feeling as soon as I say it, everyone's going to be like, oh, yeah, that pissed me off.
No, I have things that pissed me off that did not leave my mind. Obviously, the fact that they were getting no hit by Munoz was one thing. But Drew Smith coming in and give up a home run to Jazz Chisholm is unacceptable. I'm sorry. Like that he's supposed to be one of the top guys now, and he's just not. And that is in this type of game when no one's hitting the ball and you're trying to keep your team in it to come into a ball game and give up a solo shot like that. Can't happen.
No, it sucked. He did strike out the other three batters, but you're damn right. It was a managerial move. It was a managerial move that Carlos Mendoza made that I understand. I think we could strategically talk about it and say, I get it, but I bet you pissed off a lot of people. And that was the decision leading off the bottom of the eighth inning to pinch hit for Luis Torrens with DJ Stewart. Francisco Alvarez is on your bench. He's going to come into the game because you've just pinch hit for the catcher. And Carlos Mendoza gives us DJ Stewart. I'm telling you, that's a jackpot. Because even you're shaking your head. You're like, yeah, that did piss me off. How the hell do you send up DJ Stewart and not Francisco Alvarez?
Well, I went through this in one of the last podcasts I did. We should go through a weekly cut list of who should be cut from this New York Met team. DJ Stewart's on the top of that cut list. There is no reason for him to be around. He doesn't add anything anymore. You pinch hit him and he does nothing. It's frustrating.
He has one quality, and this is why I get why Mendoza used him, even if we're all going to hate it. He has the ability to not swing at pitches that are out of the strike zone. He's got a very good eye. He gets on base. He's like a slightly better version of Daniel Vogelback, is the way I would look at him. So I get why down by a run in the bottom of the eighth inning, you would say, hey, let me go to the guy with a high on-base percentage. And look, Francisco Alvarez is a guy that we all love and we all have a lot of hope for. He's got a lot to prove. That's just the reality. It's not like Francisco Alvarez has come back off of the injured list and, has gone 6 for 8. You know what I mean? Like, he has not proven himself yet. DJ Stewart, despite a very low batting average, has a little bit of pop and has a high on-base percentage. With that said, I'm not defending it because I wouldn't have done it. Like, to me, and maybe this is emotional, maybe this is being a fan and wanting to learn about our future while also trying to win games. Francisco Alvarez is the guy I'd rather see up. We've seen him have a kind of a knack for the big moment, more so last year than this year because he hasn't played enough this season. So I didn't like it, though I understand why Mendy did it, and I'm pretty sure that most people watching were probably pissed about it because I also thought, okay, you're using DJ Stewart to pinch hit for Luis Torrens. Maybe you use Alvarez to pinch hit for somebody else. But the truth is, he's not pinch hitting for Jeff McNeil. By the way, I mean, geez, I thought he was going to wake up after that 2-for-4 day down in London. Look at the way he's responded. He's done nothing. Fans are booing him. Like he's a mess. But they're not pinch hitting for Jeff McNeil. He's just not going to. And I wouldn't pinch hit for Harrison Bader, nor did he. I mean, Harrison Bader has been one of the more reliable clutch hitters. No question about it. I give him his due. So you're literally going to pinch hit for Torrens, and then Alvarez is likely never getting an at-bat, as we ended up seeing. So I get it from hey, he gets on base. If he gets and draws a walk, I can go to Tyrone Taylor. I get all that. But I think most of us look at Alvarez as the guy we want to see play baseball. We want to kind of challenge him and see what he's got. Not surprised he didn't start this game, by the way. You certainly figured that they were going to take it easy with him, and we'd see him 2 out of 3 games. I'm good with Nito going down. I'm surprised that I was, because Nito played very well. And I don't mean going down. I mean DFA. Like he's gone, and I haven't heard if anybody's claimed him or not. And who knows, maybe he can clear through and go back to AAA. But Nito played well. And I've been very harsh on Tomas Nito, but in this stint that he had with the Mets, he was pretty good. I think Luis Torrens, though, in the short time he was here, was certainly more impressive. Certainly gives you more of an upside with the stick. So I got no problem with it. Plus, we saw him throw at a base runner on Thursday night, which was nice to see. But yeah, I think that we want to see Alvarez, because that's one of the bright spots in terms of not just this year, but looking towards the future.
Question about Nito, because he saw his social media post basically saying thank you to the organization. If he's DFA'd and no one claims him, and he could choose not to go down to AAA, am I correct?
Yeah, well, but if no one signs him, he's not going to have he's going to have to sign a minor league deal somewhere. So if no one picks up Tomas Nito on waivers, he's then a free agent. And so somebody is probably going to offer him, I would think, a minor league deal. I mean, is it possible like the Phillies sign him with JT Realmuto on the injured list? I guess. But remember, this is what happened last year. Tomas Nito was DFA'd by the New York Mets. He went unclaimed. He went unsigned. The Mets re-signed him on a minor league deal. So we'll see what ends up happening. I mean, from a depth perspective, I kind of hope he goes back to AAA, because why not? You never know. What if a guy gets hurt? What if Alvarez gets hurt? What if Torrens gets hurt? What if Torrens stinks? It doesn't hurt. The other roster move that they made that caused at least some angst on social media, but I personally agree with it, was when they activated Edwin Diaz, who they were going to send down. It was brought up on the SNY broadcast on Wednesday, which was there's only 2 guys in the bullpen who had optionability. The rest, you'd have to get rid of the guy. You'd have to DFA the guy. And so it came down to Danny Young versus Dednell Nunez. Dednell Nunez cannot be sent down. And despite the fact that he pitched a lot on Wednesday, he was utterly brilliant on Wednesday night. Even though he wouldn't be available for 2 days, that's not a send-down spot. I'm sorry. He's earned not just a role in the bullpen. You could argue he's the most reliable arm in the bullpen right now. I mean, who the hell do you trust more than Dednell Nunez? So it was always Danny Young. And not a knock on Danny Young. It's nice having 2 lefties out of the bullpen, and he's pitched well. But there was this idea, and I saw a lot of people tweet this, and I got a few emails about it, that the guy they needed to send down was to release Adam Ottavino. I am not telling you I'm the president of the Adam Ottavino fan club. I am not. But the guy was their best reliever for the first month and a half of the season. He is a typical, inconsistent, sometimes great, sometimes horrible reliever, okay? That's his track record. That's his track record. And his track record this season, again, for the first month and a half of the season, was he was probably their best reliever. It is just pure emotion to say, just release him. F him. Get rid of him. Like, I'm not telling you I love the guy, but when you've got someone else who you could just send down, and God knows in a week and a half may come back because somebody gets hurt, why would you just release somebody who has shown you the capabilities of being good? Now, I know many will hear that and take it like I love Adam Ottavino. I want to give him a back massage. I don't. It's roster construction. I'm not just going to DFA him. Like, we get so emotional sometimes when a guy's not pitching well and say, he sucks, get rid of him. He sucks right now. For the first month and a half, he was actually pretty damn good. So I have no problem with the move they made. It was the right move to make because you don't lose anybody. And you never know who's going to get hurt next. Danny Young will come back. In fact, I guarantee Danny Young's going to be back. He'll be back in like a week and a half because somebody is going to have a sore freaking elbow and go on the injured list.
Can I make a case why you should cut out Ottavino?
Sure, go ahead.
In the past 15 games, his ERA is 9.24.
I get you.
That to me is unacceptable. And we talked about that, same thing with Drew Smith. But listen, yes, he went through his hot spell, which is great. But in a year where you need everyone to perform at their best, he's not doing it at the biggest time right now. Like they cannot go any longer with guys having off days, and he's had way too many. If they were able to cut, Joey Wendell, Short, you go down the list of all the guys they got rid of, Adam Ottavino. I mean, he's not going to be. He's 38 years old. It's not like he's going to get better all of a sudden.
No, but I think one of the differences, at least to me, with Adam Ottavino and Joey Wendell is that Joey Wendell sucked the entire time he was here, and he was bad at the thing he needed to be good at, which was his defense. Adam Ottavino, and you mentioned his last 15 performances. What about the previous performance? He was like their best reliever. And to me, watching Adam Ottavino with the Mets over the last 2.5 years, even watching him with the Yankees, he's typical. Like, there are moments in which he's awful, and then there are moments where he's really good. Like, with what they have right now, I'm not saying my opinion won't change in a month, but with what they have right now, I wouldn't have DFA'd him. And I get that there has been some, hey, you're not doing well, let's get rid of you. We saw it with Omar Narvaez. You mentioned Joey Wendell. I get that, and I like that. There's some great accountability, but I also think you need to be smart. I mean, there's no harm in foul with sending a guy down who's probably going to be back up in a week and a half. Like, that's what it allows you to do. We'll mix in some emails and then go through some of these earlier games in this series and also look ahead to what's coming up this weekend. Kendrick writes, guys, I wrote you guys back in late May after JD's first big Mets moment and think it's worth bringing back up. JD has now had multiple big home runs, and the timing has been everything. At this point, he needs to remain in the 3-hole for the foreseeable future. In a game where we only had 3 hits, it reinforces that winning teams don't need the most hits, but they do need the timely ones. The 9th inning for this team was monumental. Edwin's clean inning and JD's clutch hitting. Looking forward to more big Met moments in the future. Kendrick. Well, he brings up the lineup. So let's talk about that, because it took a while. It took a long time, but Carlos Mendoza finally settled on a lineup that we had talked about, I guess I would say, a month and a half ago, because lineup construction has been a topic since spring training. I was certainly with keeping it to what it was to begin with, which was Nimmo leading off, Lindor, Alonso. We've seen a lot of variations of that over the last few weeks. The one thing that has clearly worked, and no one would change, I don't think anyone would change, is Lindor leading off. It's worked. It's worked on a lot of levels. Francisco Lindor has been opened up by moving into the leadoff spot. That's a clear victory, right? I think we're all good with that. He went through a mini slump the end of London into the first game of the Miami series, but then in game 2, he woke up, he had 2 hits, he hit a home run. We saw Lindor start to slowly wake up. And look, in the case of the finale of this series, the walk that he drew to start the 9th inning and then stealing second base, pretty big moment. So Lindor in the leadoff hole, I think we're all good with. Brandon Nimmo has been a problem. Brandon Nimmo was batting 3rd, and it was not working. So we see Alonso, who is batting 2, and that wasn't working, go back to cleanup where he has had his most success, which naturally meant let's get Nimmo out of the 3 spot and let's try him in the 2 spot, which was where I think we were all kind of on the same page when they did decide to go Lindor leadoff spot. Go Lindor 1, go Nimmo 2. Nimmo takes a lot of pitches. It allows Lindor more opportunities to steal a base. What's kind of funny is that when Lindor walked in the 9th inning, Nimmo had a long at-bat. He struck out, and Lindor didn't run. He even run on the 2-2 pitch. He actually didn't run until the J.D. Martinez at-bat. Maybe at that point, because there's one out, his thought kind of changed. Look, Brandon Nimmo is not hitting, and Pete Hoffman has a chance to be prophetic. Sometimes you can have an opinion, It's a stupid opinion. We all kind of agree it's dumb. But then things happen where you're like, oh, wait, now it makes sense. So what I'm getting at is Brandon Nimmo has sucked so much that maybe him batting ninth will eventually happen. And Pete's bad idea will actually make sense because Brandon Nimmo's hitting 210.
I think this is Brandon Nimmo's strategy to try to give me a little credit once in a while. He heard the podcast, felt bad for me. He's such a good guy. He felt bad for me and said, I'm going to do my best to play myself for the ninth, to bat ninth this season. So thank you, Brandon.
He may be on his way because one thing about Mendy is he's shown you he'll move that lineup around. And I appreciate that. I like that about Mendoza. I think that what Carlos has shown us is that when things are working, when the Mets are performing, which we haven't seen a lot of, he likes to run the same lineup out every day. And I think we're starting to see that trend reemerge in baseball. We're seeing it with the Yankees where, hey, this is the lineup and we're basically running it out every day. So I think most of us like that. That's good. But he's also shown when things aren't working, I'm going to shake it up. Along with David Stearns DFAing guys and changing the roster around like Pete talked about. We have seen Mendoza's willingness to just try something. Why not? And that's led to Lindor leading off. It led to Alonso moving to the 2 spot, now back to the 4 spot. And now we have this current lineup. But I will make one more suggestion. Brandon Nimmo is now emerging, besides Jeff McNeil, as that other core Met member that you point to and say, dude, can you wake up? What kind of season are you having? You know, Lindor has woken up. His overall numbers are still not where they need to be. But certainly if you look back at over the last month, Francisco Lindor's hitting. You know, I think when you put yourself in a big hole, usually even a hot streak, it takes a long time to get your numbers to look human unless you're Aaron Judge. And then you just put up massively stupid numbers and then people forget that you didn't do anything in April. So Lindor is slowly emerging from his bad start. Pete Alonso has been very inconsistent this year. He's been up and down. But Brandon Nimmo has been horrific. He is really putting together a bad season. And so what I would suggest, based on the recent hotness of certain individuals, is this lineup. You ready for this one? You want to try this on Friday night against the San Diego Padres? Be my guest. Lindor 1, Marte 2, JD 3, Alonso 4. Now, a lot of right-hand hitters. I get that. You're going Marte righty. You're going JD righty. You're going Pete righty. And then I guess who do you want to have protect Pete? I mean, am I dropping? Do I go Nimmo 5? Maybe Nimmo 5. Viento 6. Could do something like that. Alvarez 7. Bader 8. McNeil 9. You could do that. I like Jeff McNeil batting ninth at this point. But that would be my suggestion because Starling Marte, again, if you forget about how crappy his defense has been, including costing them in London that first game, he's been hitting. So that would be my next move. And remember, Marte batted second a lot under Buck a year ago and 2 years ago before he stopped hitting. So that would be my next move because Brandon Nimmo is a problem right now.
What about Bader, though? Like, I'm not trying to squeeze Bader closer to the top, but he's been one of the more consistent hitters. And I'm not saying on base, his slugging is still low. I mean, I think his slugging is over the last 30 games or 30 days, I should say, his OPS is over 800 or close to 800. But, you know, as far as hitting the actual baseball, he's got one of the better batting averages on the team. Like, he's actually connecting on. I'm not saying put him at that spot to help Alonso, but maybe find a way to get him a little bit closer to that production area.
It's funny because in game 2 of this series, the game where the Mets scored 5 runs in the first 2 innings and ended up putting up 10, Harrison Bader batted second. And I was sort of surprised, especially after he hit that home run in the first inning and the Mets scored 10 runs, that coming back the next night in Thursday's game, Mendy didn't bat him second. He dropped him all the way down to 9. Here's the thing, Pete. At this point in the season, I'm not against anything. You know, if a guy is hot, fine, bat him second. Like, ride it out. I'm not going to sit here and look at a guy's career numbers and say, well, Harrison Bader's not a second place hitter. Look, we all know he's not a second place hitter. But when you're trying to find something, in a season in which you're 7 games under 500, I'm not against it. Like when I saw the lineup for game 2 of this series and I saw Lindor, Bader, JD, Pete, Starling, Marte, yeah, my first reaction was, wow, I'm surprised I would have done Marte too. But it's tough to be mad at it because you're just looking for anything. And the fact that Bader responded by hitting a home run in the bottom of the first inning was kind of awesome. Speaking of that game, David Peterson was very, you know how I would describe David Peterson's performance in game 2 of this series? I would describe it very David Peterson-like. Because, Tyler McGill and David Peterson, two guys that have been given another lease on life, are both very similar. Like, they will give you performances every once in a while, like David's last performance, where you say, oh, you know what? Yeah. He's put it all together. And then you get one of those, like we saw in game 2 of this series, where I give him credit, he was able to get through the 5th inning, but not before he gave up 2 runs and all of a sudden made this a baseball game. It was just a very blah performance. And so he gives you a lot of that. So I it's tough to have faith that David Peterson is ever going to put it all together. There was an email. I'd like to find the guy's name to give him credit. But basically it was Tyler McGill versus David Peterson. Who do you believe in? Like, which one do you kind of look at? Here's the email. Michael Esposito. Who do you think has a better chance of turning into a legitimate, reliable 4th starter on a winning team? David Peterson or Tyler McGill? My gut is Peterson, maybe because he's a lefty. And as they say, they often take a while to figure it out. That would have been my... First of all, I don't think either guy becomes a 4th starter on a championship caliber team. All right? I hate to give you that answer. Like, going into next season, when we're talking about the Met rotation, it would be less than ideal for either guy to really be in the mix. If you ask me right now, they're going to get the opportunity to change my opinion and change a lot of people's opinions, but I still get both guys as guys I would like to see out of the bullpen and see what they got and see if they could turn into valuable relievers. Look at Tyler's brother and what he's doing with Milwaukee. But I want to answer the question because he says, which one do you have more faith in? Probably the lefty thing with Peterson, because you are right. We've seen that so often where it takes just longer for a lefty to put it together. But both guys are very tough to have that much faith in. Really, the story from game 2 of this series, besides the offense, besides, Starling Marte hitting a bomb of a home run that hasn't landed yet, Harrison Bader setting the tone with the 2-run home run, the Marlins just absolutely horrendous defense in the 2nd inning that handed the Mets all those runs to make it a 5-2 game. The story was Dednell Nunez. And even though we haven't seen the complete consistency of it, if there is a minor victory in this season, is how we have seen a handful of relievers come out of nowhere and at least for a period of time be really good contributors. Reed Garrett for a while. And I don't think all hope is lost with Reed Garrett. I just don't think he's, I think for a while, especially that first month of the year, we're like, oh my God, we just discovered Jabba Chamberlain on steroids. It's not that, but can he be a somewhat reliable reliever? He still gets a lot of swing and misses. Yeah, I guess so. I'm not burying him. But you had Reed Garrett dominate for a month and, like I said, can still be a reliable reliever. You've had Danny Young pitch reasonably well. And now you've got Dednell Nunez, who's a guy that you have to keep on this roster. And you have to give more opportunities to and see what they've got. But the fun part about game 2 of this series is that they needed to respond, and they did it offensively. Game 1 just sucked. Like, everything about game 1 annoyed me because you're coming off this win against the Phillies in London. You can look at the last week and say, hey, they're playing well. 1-1 against the best team in the National League. They swept the Nationals. They won those 2 against Arizona before losing 2. Hey, the Mets are playing well. Hey, they've won 6 out of 9 or whatever it was. To come back at home against the Marlins, and I don't want to hear the jet lag crap, scored 2 runs in the 2nd inning in which it looks like you're about to explode. Because remember, they got the first 3 guys on base. Vientos hit that 2-run double, and then you can't get him in. And then after that, you do nothing against the guy in Jesus Luzardo, who, let's face it, has had a horrendous season if he's not facing the Mets. I did the math. Against the Mets, 11 2/3 innings, 2 runs. Against everybody else, a 5.90 ERA. He's had a bad season against everybody and very good performances, two of them against the Mets. So that was frustrating. And then you can't hit their bullpen. And you lose a game in which your bats look completely lifeless. And the reason I don't want to hear about the travel, one I'll half jokingly about, is that I freaking travel. And then I did a show within 2 hours. You could play baseball a day and a half later. And look, I did the London flight. It ain't that much different than California. Okay? California's 5.5 hours. This is 7 hours. It ain't that big of a difference. I'd be the first to tell you. And I hate flying. So let's not act like it's crazy. That's number one. Number two, Mendy said it. They had such a good second inning in which it looked like they were exploding. So they weren't jet lag in the second inning. But then after that, now we're tired. And then the other thing is the Phillies. Phillies didn't look jet lag. They won their game. So it was a very disheartening loss. Tyler McGill was frustrating. You know, like I said about Peterson, it was a very Tyler McGill-like performance. He can't get through the fifth inning. He wasn't helped out by Vientos. That was a tough error to give him. Vientos made that great scoop, and then he rushed the throw, and it was wild. So it was a very uneven beginning to this series. But look, big picture for a second. The Mets began a 12-game stretch in which I looked at it, and I said this on the air with Tiki. I looked at the 12 games coming up, and the 12 games I'm talking about lead into the Subway Series. You know, that's the line of demarcation where the schedule stiffens up a little bit because you are facing the New York Yankees, who, whether we like it or not, are pretty damn good. You had 3 against Miami at home, 3 against San Diego, a team you're chasing at home, 3 in Texas, a team that's under 500, and then 3 in Chicago, another team you're chasing. You got 12 games. And I viewed it as go 8-4. You're 8 games under 500. You go 8-4. Now you're 4 games under 500. Still not great, but you're in it. And then you feel decent about yourself going into this series against the Yankees and the Astros. We are 3 games into this 12-game run where, in my opinion, 8-4 is the goal number. That's the goal result. They're 2-1. If they go 2-1 in every series they play going into the Yankees, they're 8-4. The problem is, against the team that has the worst record in the National League, your hope is better than 2-1. Your hope is 3-0, and that allows you a chance to maybe slip up against Texas or slip up against San Diego or Chicago and still manage to go 8-4. So where's my confidence level right now that they're going to go 8-4 over this 12-game stretch? Not very high. I'm not going to lie to you about that. There's a difference between having confidence in something happening and watching something and hoping it happens. Does that make sense? Does that explain where I'm at as a Met fan right now? I am not telling you they're going to go 8-4. I'm not confident they're going to go 8-4, but that's my hope. That's my goal. And as I sit there watching every night, that's where I hope this thing lands. They are 2-1 so far on that stretch of games. Now, they welcome in the San Diego Padres. The San Diego Padres right now are playing pretty good baseball. They've won 3 in a row. They are 2 games above 500. They are now occupying wild card spot number 2 in the National League. The Mets right now are 4.5 games behind San Diego. But here's what's very important. They're only 2 back in the loss column. These games matter because if you want to make the playoffs, you have to win tiebreakers. There are a lot of teams bunched together in the National League. That's usually one of the things you'll hear from people who say, don't listen to being 3 games out. You got to catch 7 teams. We get it. There's a lot of teams between the Mets and a wild card spot. That's why you got to win a lot of games. No question. That's why you can't be 7 games under 500 to make the playoffs. I can guarantee you that. You're not making the playoffs at 77 and 85. It's not happening. I don't think you're making the playoffs at 80 and 82. If I had to guess right now, I think 82, 83 is the number. So you have to be above 500. And they got a long way to go, no doubt. But understand what's on the line. You don't have to believe. You don't have to care. You don't have to watch. You can do whatever the hell you want. but understand what's at stake. The Mets are 2 games behind the Padres in the loss column as a team that you would like them to catch to make the postseason. And every game matters when it comes to the tiebreakers. And yeah, you got to think about tiebreakers. Sucks, but it's true. They're going to face a right-hander in game 1 of this series, Matt Waldron, who's pitched reasonably well. Sean Manaea is on the mound. His stats have sort of been ruined by his last few performances, especially what happened in London. On Saturday, they're facing Adam Mazur, who is a young, inexperienced right-handed pitcher. And then on Sunday, they're going to take on Dylan Cease, one of the big moves the Padres made, one of the more reliable starters in baseball. So they're about to face 3 right-handers. They've got Manaea on Friday, unreliable. Quintana on Saturday, very unreliable. And then Tyler McGill on Sunday in that matchup against Dylan Cease before they head to Texas. 2 out of 3. Can you win 2 out of 3? By the way, one interesting thing. If you don't find it interesting, I apologize. I find it interesting. The Mets played a rubber game against the Miami Marlins. And for whatever reason, I was sitting there and I'm like, it doesn't feel like we've played a lot of rubber games. It feels like usually the final game of a series would be the Mets trying to avoid being swept, right? We've talked about that a lot. So I went back and looked at a little chart I have. When was the last time the Mets played a rubber game of a 3-game series? Obviously, when you play a 4-game series like they did against Arizona, or a 2-game series like they did against Philadelphia, there are no rubber games. If you had to guess, Pete, like off the top of your head, how long it's been since they played a true rubber game of a 3-game series, do you know when that was? Because I have the answer, and it was sort of surprising.
I think I know what it is because let's be before the Mets didn't lose to the Diamondbacks in that series. The last series they won was to the Cardinals like May 7th. So I think this is probably somewhere in April.
Yeah, so I think this is nuts. The Mets' last rubber game of a 3-game series was not only April, it was early in the season. It was actually against the Royals. That was the weekend at Citi Field where they retired Doc Gooden's number in the middle of April. So they haven't done a lot of this, just on 3-game series alone. Just 3-game series. They swept the Nationals last week, so they were up 2-0 going into game 3. They got swept by the LA Dodgers at Citi Field. They avoided a sweep at the hands of the San Francisco Giants. They got swept by the Cleveland Guardians. They avoided a sweep at the hands of the Miami Marlins. They avoided a sweep against Atlanta. That's when Brandon Nimmo hit a walk-off home run. They got swept by the Tampa Bay Rays. They avoided a sweep at home against the Cardinals. That was the game where Vientos hit the game winner. They avoided a sweep in San Francisco against the Giants. That was the end of that West Coast trip. They tried to sweep the LA Dodgers on that West Coast trip. They lost the finale. Tyler Glasnow pitched that game. They swept the Pittsburgh Pirates. So the last time they played a 3-game series in which there was a rubber game was a Sunday afternoon in April against the Kansas City Royals. They actually played 3 consecutive rubber games, and shockingly enough, they were 3-0. And now they're 4-0. The New York Mets, as crappy as this season has been, are undefeated in rubber games. How about that? 4-0. Tell that to your friends at work tomorrow. They're going to say, you're a loser. And then you'll say, well, I got it from a loser, so it's okay.
But we're not a loser on rubber games.
That's right. No, we're winners on rubber. The Mets are 4-0 in rubber games. Now, what we learned from that is that they're definitely losing their next rubber game. There's no doubt about that. But at this point, I'll tell you right now, get me a rubber game on the Father's Day on Sunday. Give me a chance to win that series against the San Diego Padres. Give me that hope, because that's what's really important. It's important to continue to win series. And if they do, they've got a chance to have that 8-4 run that we're talking about. So how do I feel right now as a Met fan? I feel good. I'm glad they won. It was a nice comeback. They got a lot of work to do, though. 7 games under 500. A lot of work to do.
All right, I have 2 things. First, I want to play you a voicemail, and then I have a serious question about someone who was in the minors today and played a different position. So we'll get into that. But here's the voicemail.
Hey, it's Jeff from Raleigh. Just leaving a message on the Mets crisis hotline. Calling after the Mets just lost 3-2 to the Marlins. Not just lost, but lost last night. Look at the standings this morning, and somehow they are 3.5 games out of the wild card. And I think it's almost like 2 games or 3 games out in the loss column, right? This is pretty ridiculous that these players, with the talent that they should have, are botching this opportunity to be relevant. I will tell you, as soon as McGill gave up the 2 runs, and I believe the third, I felt like there was no chance they were going to come back. It just felt like that kind of game again. So it's been a season filled with those kinds of games. Nobody's on the rail cheering in the 9th inning, none of that stuff. Just doesn't seem like they got what it takes.
It still doesn't feel like they got what it takes, even after responding to that listless loss with 2 victories in a row. But what the Mets have been given is an opportunity. That's what we are looking at. And right now, when you're 7 games under 500, and certainly in my lifetime as a baseball fan, when you're 7 games under 500 in the middle of June, you are usually buried. You're usually out of it. And you're watching games and you're hoping for some kind of miracle and you're hoping to see some youth, but you don't have that opportunity in front of you. The Mets have it. And look, I know that there's a lot of people out there, and I'm certainly one of them, who doesn't think they're going to take advantage of it, but they have that opportunity. And we could have a broader discussion on what that's like for baseball. Like, is it good for baseball? Right now, that's not even relevant. What's relevant is they're not buried. And they have an opportunity in front of them. And we knew that going into this series against Miami. We know this going into this series against San Diego. And the hope is they're going to shut us up and prove us wrong and take advantage of the opportunity.
Now, in case I missed it, maybe I did, but did you touch on Brett Baty playing second base?
I love the fact that Brett Baty is playing second base, because one thing that drives me nuts is when you have the minor leagues in front of you at your disposal, or you have spring training at your disposal, use it to explore, use it to imagine, use it to say, hey, I don't know if this is going to be a scenario that I'm going to take advantage of, but let me see this guy at that position, And so Brett Baty is a third baseman. They tried him in the outfield a couple of years ago. Clearly, they abandoned it. Okay. Mark Vientos is a third baseman. Plays a little first base, but for now, that position is occupied. Why not try to find more versatility? Why not? Because if Brett Baty can prove he can hit at the major league level, and Mark Vientos is in the process of proving he can hit at the major league level, it would be nice to give yourself options defensively. So I am thrilled that Brett Baty is learning second base. Now, does that mean I envision him as the everyday second baseman someday? Probably not, but let's find out. Let's see another avenue for Brett Baty to play if he proves he can hit. Because Jeff McNeil is playing himself out of being an everyday player. And he already sort of has. Jose Iglesias plays a lot. Now, the Mets are about to face 3 righties in a row. I will be really intrigued to see how Carlos Mendoza handles this. Does he run Jeff McNeil out every freaking day because he's just going to play him against a righty, even though McNeil has actually performed better against lefties than righties this season, and over the course of his major league career is dead even on how he does against lefties and righties? We'll see. But I love that they're exploring that. And it doesn't mean I think he's ever going to be great defensively or ever become a predominant second baseman, but Brett Baty needs different ways to get into this lineup if he can hit. Because here's the problem with Baty right now. If Brett Baty had position versatility, like if he could play the outfield and he could play second base, he'd be in the major leagues and DJ Stewart would be in the minor leagues. Like a big part of why DJ Stewart is in the major leagues right now is not just that he doesn't swing at bad pitches. It's that he can play the outfield. Like Brett Baty can only play third base. And if Mark Vientos is your everyday third baseman, which he has earned right now, that opportunity, then what the hell are you doing with this one-dimensional guy? Position versatility would have had him on the major league roster. And I would have fought for it. I would have said it here on the Rico. Yeah, he could play left field. Great. Hey, he could play second base. Great. You'll find ways to play him. But if he can only play third base, it makes it very difficult to get his bat in the lineup. So I love that he's learning second base. If anything, I'd say, why the hell didn't they do this in spring training? Like, I know we're the Rico, but it's the same thing with the Yankees. Like, clearly right now, they have a surplus of outfielders, right? They've got all these good outfielders. They've got Aaron Judge. They've got Juan Soto. They got Giancarlo Stanton. They got Alex Verdugo. And they got Jason Dominguez. They also have Anthony Rizzo hitting about 225, and his defense has gone backwards. Logically, the Yankees' best lineup would be taking any one of those outfielders I mentioned and having them play first base. Now, I believe that first base is not something that you could just stick a guy over at. You have to learn the position. But that's the beauty of spring training in the minor leagues. Let guys learn the position. Let guys play spring training games over there. It always drove me nuts, and it still does, how in spring training, as you're getting ready for a season, why not stick guys around all over the place? Why not? Like, what's the worst that could happen? They suck? Okay, great. Then they never have to play the position. So I think it's a good thing, and I think it's a way for Baty to get back here because Brett Baty's already proven he can hit AAA pitching. And he's either a quadruple A player, which he may well be, or he's just wasting time in the minors learning another position because he's not doing anything offensively. Hey, one other thing I want to get into, though, and I'm going to get pissed about this. I'm telling you right now. Christian Scott's got to get here soon. All right? He's got to get here soon. And every excuse in the world now, we're limiting his innings. We have a lot of off days. It doesn't make sense to have a six-man rotation. Whatever, dude. Christian Scott needs to be here soon. I'd rather you have a six-man rotation. I mean, we need to see Jose Quintana every 5 days, Sean Manaea every 5 days. The only starting pitcher that I would like to see on his regular day is Luis Severino. That's it. Manaea, Quintana, Peterson, and Miguel, give me a freaking break. Right now, if I had to predict, none of those guys should be in the rotation in 2025. None of them. Right now, the guys I'm eyeing for the 2025 rotation that are here, I'm not going to mention Corbin Burns. Obviously, they should go after him. Would be Kodai Senga, if he ever pitches again. I know he's slowly on his way back. We'll see. Christian Scott. I'm still intrigued by Jose Budo. I still need to see more. And then maybe by the end of the year, we're talking about Blade Tidwell. And we're talking about the other kid who's at AA. The name is escaping.
Stout.
I'm sorry, what?
Is it Stout?
Yes.
Stout?
Yeah. Whatever his name is. I always forget. Brandon something. That's the other guy. But outside of that right now, I don't necessarily believe in Tyler McGill and David Peterson and all those other guys. Anyhow, great victory to wrap up this series. The Mets win a series. We're feeling good. Hopefully they build on this. You can email the pod anytime, thericob@gmail.com. Could also leave us a voicemail. Pete's doing a great job of mixing in the voicemails now. See, you're never ignored. The number to voicemail us is 725-222-8699. Thank you very much for downloading, subscribing, and listening to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.